Okay.
Terrific. I'm Alfonso Carney, and I am really pleased to have the opportunity to welcome board members to this January 17th special meeting of the DASNY Board of Directors. We have a very brief agenda, deceptively so, because it may be a long meeting, we'll find out. But I am looking forward to hearing questions and comments from all the members. There are video conferencing matters that have to be addressed in the minutes. Nadine Fontaine, the general counsel, is on. Nadine, if you would run the traps on that, I'd be very grateful.
Certainly. I'm going to provide the record with the relevant legal provisions that allow us to conduct this meeting remotely. So as a result of the ongoing public health emergency, the governor has issued Executive Order 11, which was extended by Executive Order 11.6 and suspends the provisions of Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, which is also known as the Open Meetings Law. These provisions authorize public boards, including this board, to meet remotely and to take action without permitting in-person access to meetings. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Meetings Law, which is Public Officers Law, Section 103, notice has been posted for this meeting, regarding this meeting, to allow the public the ability to view or listen to the proceedings. An audio and video recording of today's meeting will be accessible from DASNY's website within 2 days, and a transcript will be posted as soon as practicable, tongue twister, under the circumstances. So for additional information, I refer the public to DASNY's website. So unless there's any other questions, if permissible, Mr. Chair, I'd like to have Amanda proceed with the roll call, if that's permissible.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hey,
Amanda,
hi. So from our board, we have Chair Al Carney, Jerry Romsky, Joan Sullivan, Phyllis Morris, Wellington Chen, John Gardner, Lisa Gomez, Beryl Snyder, Janice McKinney, and Adrian Swizerski. On the DASNY staff, we have Ruben McDaniel, Paul Koopman, Kim Ellis, Nadine Fontaine, Deb Faster, Dwight Flynn, and myself, Amanda Nazario.
thank you very
I got everyone. If I missed anyone, please let me know. Now you can send me a message.
Just a
Is there
point of
anybody else?
clarification. A point of clarification, Dwight Flynn is no longer in the meeting.
Oh, great.
And Sarah Richard, who would normally be in this meeting, has had a family matter and is out today. So we will just want to make sure that's in the minutes. Sarah would normally have been here, but she's not. All right. Again, welcome to the members, welcome to staff, and welcome to any guests that we may have on the line. Nadine, thank you for reading into the minutes the necessary information to make this meeting valid. We have one agenda item today, and it is to consider providing authorization to create a subsidiary, a DASNY subsidiary. We have done this before. This is a particularly interesting one, and I will ask Nadine, who has prepared the resolution dated today, actually, the formation of this subsidiary. Nadine, you want to walk us through that?
Sure. I have a brief description regarding the authority to proceed with the creation of the subsidiary and authorizing the submission and filing of the certificate of incorporation to move forward with that subsidiary. Under the recently enacted legislation that was included in the executive budget, DASNY was granted the authority to lease, plan, design, construct, rehabilitate, improve, furnish, and equip conditional adult use cannabis retail dispensaries for operation by social equity licensees who've been duly licensed by the Office of Cannabis Management and the Cannabis Control Board. The statute also allowed the creation of a private or debt equity fund, which we have currently identified as the Social Equity Investment Fund, to support the creation and development of such dispensaries. The enacted legislation also included the addition of PAL, Public Authorities Law, Section 1678, Subdivision 30, which authorizes DASNY to enter into one or more agreements with OCM and the CCB and the fund to either acquire, actually it's all of these are the following requirements, to acquire by sublease or lease as lessee or agent, real property necessary or convenient for the construction and reconstruction of the dispensaries, to prepare or cause to prepare, whether as principal of agent or agent, plan and cost estimates for the construction or reconstruction of dispensaries, and to enter into contracts for design and construction of the dispensaries, to enter leases, sublease, or other agreements as agent for the fund, subject to OCM's approval for the general terms of these agreements. And finally, to enter into as lender or as agent for the lender, and in this case, the lender would be the fund, into non-recourse loan agreements with eligible licensees, provided that the interest rate charged does not exceed 8% plus prime. To address and accordingly limit DASNY's exposure directly engaging in this work performed on behalf of OCM and the CCB and the fund, the statute also allows DASNY to create one or more subsidiaries that is specifically empowered to enter into the subleases or leases, service the non-recourse loan agreements, furnish property management services, and also provide general operational and administrative support services. The act requires that the subsidiary be formed as a public benefit corporation with the same powers, privileges, immunities, tax exemptions, and other exemptions that DASNY would have, and that the members of the DASNY board for each subsidiary, the member of the board for the subsidiary shall also be the same members of the board for DASNY. In addition, the liabilities, obligations, and responsibilities of the subsidiary that's formed, that will be formed, subject to board approval, shall not be imposed upon DASNY unless DASNY so provides. So in accordance with the provisions of Public Authorities Law, Section 2827-A2, the authority's budget office and the governor, the controller, and the legislature was provided with notice of our intent to create the subsidiary. So the resolution before the board today seeks to obtain authorization, allowing DASNY to continue that process and file the certificate of incorporation, which is the official process with the Secretary of State, which would allow us to establish the subsidiary for the purposes of limiting liability against DASNY and in connection with the work performed in this initiative. And that concludes my presentation.
Nadine, thank you. We've got all the board members present. And I know that you have each had the opportunity to speak with Ruben and or Paul and or Ricardo and or Nadine. Are there questions that arise from your reading of the memorandum entitled Formation of Subsidiary?
Yes.
John Gardner has a question. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank Nadine and Ruben for the review that we had the other day or earlier this week. Is very helpful. Nadine's or whoever's memo it was that was circulated yesterday focused me. I have a few questions that arise from that memo. In the memo, okay. In the memo, we refer to a fund with a capital F, and we've all heard about New York Social Equity Cannabis Investment Fund, LP. Are we talking about the 50 million would be going into a different fund? Is that, are they the same or is it different?
The 50 million is the state's investment towards the fund that is going to be created. So it's a different fund. There is a cannabis revenue fund which is subject to, which is created pursuant to state finance law section 99-II, and that is the fund in which the license fees from the cannabis, be it the social equity cannabis or the cultivators, all of their license fees will go into that cannabis revenue fund. That is a state fund. The fund that we're talking about is
the limited partnership is where the private investment is coming. And is this fund that we talk about in your memo, is that essentially like an escrow account within DASNY? In other words, it's not an entity, it's a bookkeeping fund?
Actually, no, this is going to be a private equity fund that will be a separate entity that will be created and for the purposes of receiving the state's $50 million and also raising an additional $150 million to support the efforts and the work that's going to be done to stand up these dispensaries.
Okay,
So the private equity fund will comprise $200 million. Is that
Correct.
sort of the capitalization of this subsidiary, essentially?
Correct.
so that is New York Social Equity Cannabis Investment Fund LP.
Well, the fund is yet to be created, but that is the
Okay.
anticipated name of that fund. We are currently in the process of, there's a pending procurement that is out currently to identify an entity that will create the fund that DASNY will be operating as agent of.
Okay, so they may be the same, and the press is confusing them. I'm guessing they're not going to be multiple funds. They're probably the same thing.
Correct.
So who is going to form that? That's going to be formed by OCM or CCB?
So John, we're going through a procurement now to hire the fund manager.
Yeah.
Once that procurement is complete, the selected fund manager will actually create the independent fund.
Okay, all right. So we're going to do it. That's the.
So let's just to go to the next step. So they will create the independent fund. We will then negotiate with the fund manager the limited partnership agreement before making the $50 million investment on behalf of the state.
Okay.
DASNY's board, in addition to DOB, has to approve that limited partnership agreement. So that work will come back to you in the next 45 to 60 days.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Fund will be
Okay.
an independent entity. It will not be an entity of DASNY.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. The legislation that authorizes us to we're creating this subsidiary on our own initiative. It's not in, or tell me, is it in the legislation that authorizes us to take on this role?
Correct. There's 3 new provisions that were added. There is the Public Officers Law, Section 1678, 30, 31, and 32. There's a specific provision, 30, which allows us to create the subsidiary for the purposes of standing up and performing the work on behalf of this private equity fund or on behalf of OCM and CCB.
Okay, all right. So, but this subsidiary, I'm stating the obvious. It will not be a creature of the public authorities law. It's not like an authority. It's something that we create as opposed to the legislature creating it.
It will still be created as a public benefit corporation, which is still subject to the requirements of reporting
of the public authorities law. Got it.
Yeah, what I'm getting at, or what I'm leading to, I'll just cut to the chase, is in the memo, there's mention of obtaining liability insurance for the directors, the members of the board of the cannabis sub. I would want more than insurance. I think that the directors of the cannabis sub, which are the people on this call, should have an affirmative commitment from DASNY to indemnify them in the event of any legal action, to defend them, to advance the costs that might be necessary to defend them. In other words, they shouldn't be reimbursed, and they should not be subject to some liability carrier disclaiming coverage. It should be pretty airtight.
Sal, you're reading my mind. I feel like you're in my head. I worry about these sorts of things, but I don't want to be reimbursed if there's an issue. I want for DASNY or the cannabis subsidiary to actually take the lead. I don't want to have to worry about whether or not there is some state law that makes it necessary to evaluate my claim that there is an issue that I should be paid for.
That's exactly what I'm getting at, because we will
I know.
not be a statutory authority. So the protection we get is the protection we build into that certificate of incorporation and the protection we build into the organizational documents. And I think everyone, all of us who signed up for the board of DASNY, maybe with the exception of Lisa, who's brand new, we were not expecting to be in this role. This is a very operational role. I mean, I don't entirely understand the details, but I can glean enough from what I've read in the memo, what we talked about, and what I've now had a chance to sort of scan on the internet. Am now a subscriber to Cannabis Business News. We are. I mean, it looks like we're potentially going to own property. We're going to build it out.
Wait, John. Wait. We're not owning any property. We are not taking on any operating liability or responsibility. We're not selecting licensees. We're not.
But we're going to build it out, and then we're going to sublease it.
So what the fund is doing is hiring DASNY to identify, design, and build these facilities. The fund and OCM will be entering into the leases with the landlord and the subleases with the licensees. Our subsidiary will not be involved in that from a legal perspective. Our role will be like it is otherwise, that is to execute on the build out of the facilities so that from the state's perspective, the investment perspective, they have an authority they're very comfortable with doing that type of work and can protect the upfront dollars from DASNY's perspective. But we are legally separate from and not involved at all in the licensing process or the cannabis process on how these.
And if I could just real quickly, just in addition, we're doing it like we normally do as DASNY. However, it is different in that as an agent, not as a direct, we don't have a direct contractual relationship with the firms we're using. So again, we've tried to insulate ourselves one more level down by being an agent of the fund for both the construction as well as the leasing.
So, but we are the agent for financial purposes. In other words, the financial commitments that a licensee gives to the cannabis investment fund or whatever agency licenses them, we're the enforcement arm of that relationship. We're the servicing agent.
We are the servicing agent, yes.
So as servicing agent, we're pretty operational. That's really my point. I appreciate that we're not the principal in a lot of these contexts, but we are, we're in the boots of the thing. And where all of that leads me is that we may not have, as board members, the protections we expect as board members of DASNY when we are acting as board members of the cannabis sub. And
the protections that are afforded the board for DASNY are exactly identical to the protections that are afforded to the board as a subsidiary.
So
the purposes of creating the subsidiary is to shield any additional liability that might be imposed to the DASNY board as a result of these acts. We have the additional insurance requirement.
Hey, why don't you take a second and explain that, the concept? I mean, I know you got it, John gets it, but there are more board members who are not lawyers. Why don't you take a second and explain the corporate veil concept so that board members will know that at least the intent is to protect them from liability that they would not normally have to incur.
I'm sorry, your voice went out a little bit towards the end.
Just trying to make sure that the board members who are not lawyers understand that the reason we're voting a subsidiary is to protect DASNY and its members from unforeseen liability. Maybe, I'm not sure it's unforeseeable, but unforeseen liability. You might want to just take a second and talk about the corporate veil concept.
Definitely. So in addition to the corporate veil concept, I just also wanted to point out in the legislation, there is specific language that indicates that liability shall not be passed on to the board members absent the ASME directly indicating that they want that form of liability to be passed.
Absent gross negligence or negligence, I don't know, but one or the other, I assume.
And with respect to the agency principal relationship, so DASNY, the subsidiary will be acting as agent for the principal. In that context, meaning that all the liability and the decision-making will be made by the principal. So liability will not be imputed to the agent.
Okay.
In this case, unless there's specific, in this case, the subsidiary, unless we take specific actions to demonstrate that we have control over the decision-making of the process. With respect to this, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's what the papers will say. That's not necessarily what the litigants will say. And what I'm more interested in is when the litigants say ridiculous things in litigation. None of us is spending their own personal money to defend themselves against the ridiculous things that litigants say in litigation.
Right. I mean, well, I can't say that we will not be named. Anyone can file a lawsuit.
I can say right now, Nadine, that we'll get named. Let's
But if
we're going to get sued, it is what it is. But let's deal with it as best we can, Nadine. Help us to understand that the shields that you are putting up are shields that you believe will protect us. That's correct. What I hear John asking.
And what I'm really getting at is that there are things we can do at inception that make this work a lot better if we're thinking about them. So what often happens is that, when everyone's getting together to put together the CCB and the OCM, and they're all working on the legislation, they got the legislative staff, and everyone's all in a room working on the thing. They may have been assigning to DASNY and not necessarily thinking about DASNY's issues in the process, and that's fine. I'm not being critical of that. That is the nature of reality. Or it's the nature of how things work. So here we are at a moment in time forming our own subsidiary for the very purpose of addressing these issues. I want the subsidiary to make DASNY as bulletproof as possible, but I also want the subsidiary to make these board members as bulletproof as possible, which means that we're not relying, if the sub has D&O insurance, great. I love D&O insurance. But at the end of the day, if we get into a fight,
we all love D&O.
We all love D&O. At the end of the day, if we get into a fight with the carrier because they're, construing something that, one way or another, then DASNY steps up. This sub may or may not have assets to really indemnify people, but DASNY does. And I'm more comfortable, frankly, if the full weight of DASNY is backing the members of this board in their capacity as members of the board.
In addition, hearing that, I just also wanted to indicate that we are also working on multiple agreements that ensure that the requisite indemnification and hold harmless provisions are included in those agreements. We are working through an MOU with the state, OCM, CCB. We are working, and we will ensure that the contract that's entered into with the limited partnership that is created, the fund that's created specifically outlines and includes those requirements. The construction related contracts will also similarly have indemnification provisions and require, general liability coverage obtained by the selected contractors that will be, or design build teams that will be selected to perform the work. So we are making sure from a statutory, contractual, and legal perspective that the protections are in place
Yeah.
to shield both DASNY and the subsidiary.
We all appreciate that. And let me say, I'm very optimistic about this. I think this is going to surprise everybody with how well it works. I really do. But I also, I also look around the room, and there are moments in time when you've got an opportunity to sort of, shore up the, if the rubber hits the road in a wrong way that you haven't anticipated, you're okay. I mean, that's really what I'm getting at. And so I would like to see, the certificate of incorporation. I'm going to vote for it. Obviously, the best thing we can do is create the subsidiary. It's absolutely the right thing. I would like to see it just as a matter of looking at it to make sure it's got whatever, we can put into it I like to read the actual documents.
And John, let me say that I absolutely agree. Where I was headed was to ask Nadine to consider, there are people on this board who are not lawyers. That's fine. We need all of you, every single person on this board. But I have a particular interest in understanding the indemnification provisions of the contracts that we enter into. And I say that to Nadine, I say it to Paul, I say it to Ricardo. I am concerned about that. Probably not necessarily. It's just, my own worry about whether or not the contracts that we're entering into are, in my view, in my personal view, the best that we can have. I'm sure they will be. To your point, I'm sure that we're going to have terrific agreements, but I'm concerned about the liability issue. And you made the point earlier. I don't want to be concerned because I'm going to have to deal with people asking me what. I don't want to be investigated to see whether or not I'm going to be reimbursed. What I want to do is to get out front and say, I don't want to have to spend a penny if there are issues. DASNY will cover that. I don't know I don't know now whether DASNY has for its board members D&O insurance. I assume DASNY does, but I've never asked that question.
We do. We do.
Mhm.
And I just want to add to Al's comment. There's going to be a point in the near future, like probably within the next few years, when that entire 50 million is spent and the subsidiary will have $10 in the bank. It's going to be thin. So the protection really does have to come from DASNY.
All right, let's give other board members an opportunity to weigh in. There are a lot of y'all on the phone. Do you have questions?
This is Joan, and I'm one of those on the board that is not a lawyer. And I feel a lot more uncomfortable now than I did before this meeting. So, I'm looking to you, John, actually, to make sure that, in review of those documents, you're comfortable so that we can rely on your comfort.
Joan, what we're going to rely on is Nadine's comfort.
Well, that's true too. Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
She is the person whose job responsibility is to make this right. John and I
Absolutely.
are on the periphery, and I'm grateful to you, Gardner, for being on the periphery. Grateful to you, John, for doing what you're doing. And I'm doing what I'm doing. It is what it is. But it's Nadine's group that's going to have to make this comfortable for all of us. And once we're going to vote this today, one way or the other, and I think it'll get voted up. But that raises a different question for me. And I'm going to step away from your concern, John, for a second. Nadine, if a board member on the DASNY board chooses not to be a member of this board, of the subsidiary board, the law seems to require that there be an identity of members from one board to another. What happens if somebody says, I don't want to be on this board?
Then likely they should no longer be a member of the board of DASNY. It's a requirement of their duties as a board member of DASNY, and the statute specifically indicates that the board members have to also participate in subsidiaries. The subsidiaries is created by the entity, so it would be nation as to whether they will.
That makes sense if you're dealing with a healthcare subsidiary, Nadine. I'm not sure that I agree, but you're going to have your folk check. If a board member of the DASNY board chooses not to be a member of this subsidiary board for whatever reasons, be they public relations reasons, business reasons, cannabis is cannabis. You deal with it the best way you can. I get it. But if a DASNY board member says, I really don't want to do this, you think that person would need to resign from the DASNY board?
It would be in contradiction with the requirements of the statute. The statute specifically indicates as such.
Okay, no, I hear you. I wish you would make a few phone calls and make sure that your view makes sense, given the way what I've read, what you've sent to us. But I want to make sure that people have, if they don't have the obligation to be on a cannabis board, let's make sure that they don't have to be and can remain on the DASNY board. Or they can't.
So let me,
Well, what, John, you and I have monopolized this conversation. Are there other board members who
I wanted to follow on your comment. I just want to follow on your comment about the identity of the board.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
It's illustrative of how I think a lot of this came together without, it didn't think all the way through the DASNY side of it. The subsidiary is much stronger as an insulator of liability from DASNY if the boards are not identical. And
I agree. I absolutely agree, but I want to make sure that we flesh that out a bit so that Nadine can think through carefully and call the.
And if I don't know whether there's any opportunity to change this or, refine it. This is one of the things that Nadine and Ruben can think about. But if the board of the cannabis subsidiary had some independent members, then in any situation where there was a potential conflict, and again, we got to think way in advance, in any situation where there's a potential conflict between the interests of the cannabis subsidiary and the interests of DASNY itself, those independent members are vital. That's when you want the independent members. So, I don't know, this may be all set in stone, but if we had input in this, at the early stages, that would have been, I think, one of our first comments is not everybody on the DASNY board is game for this, and not having identical boards would be a benefit. All right, I'm going to put myself on mute.
You will be muted.
Look, there are 100 things that we might have done differently. We didn't do them differently. We're at, in my youth, this would have been called a shit or go blind moment. I don't like that expression, but it's from my youth, and it makes sense in the context of a decision that has to be made. As I said in my note to you all, I want unanimity. I always want unanimity, but this is a departure from the business that you joined when you accepted the offer of membership on the DASNY board. It's a right turn, it's a left turn, whatever it is. I want to make sure that every board member is clear that this is a departure from what you signed on for. It's a great departure. It's a terrific departure. Gives us an opportunity to do some fantastic things from New York State. But you may not have as much enthusiasm for it as I do, frankly. So if there are questions from the members, please, that's what we're here for. The objective is to hear what's on.
If I could just make a
So
statement.
Al, oh,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead,
Jen,
Merle.
if I could just make a statement for a moment. If we're going to continue about the appointment or position of board members on the subsidiary, I would suggest that we move into executive session so that we can discuss this matter accordingly.
I thought about that, Nadine, but if we can do it without going to executive session, I prefer that. This is the sort of stuff that ought to be on the record. We're making a big decision here, and the public ought to have a sense that maybe we were not in unity, maybe we were, however it works out. If you want to go to executive session, then I'll leave it alone and we'll go there. How am I doing?
It really depends upon, the progress of the discussion, because we did begin entering into the appointment realm. So, I'd be more comfortable if we were going to continue on this track to move the matter into an executive session for further discussion.
Well, let's see what Beryl's comment is. Beryl's about to say something.
Janice actually was about
I think
to.
Janice had something.
Okay,
Sorry.
first, I wasn't comfortable in the beginning before the conversation with Nadine and Ruben, and not because I don't trust them or anything. I think it's just because, as John said, it's not what you signed up for. However, that's also kind of, you didn't read the fine print of that. If you're a part of DASNY and then there's a subsidiary that needs to be created, then you are then a part of that subsidiary also. So I would be comfortable again with moving forward because we're giving them the permission to create this subsidiary. Ruben and Nadine were very transparent and open to say there are things they're still trying to work through, and that, they would keep us engaged, informed. But I do want to trust that we are safeguarded from things that, we personally might have to be subjected to, professionally might have to be subjected to, because of, in lieu of being on DASNY, that now we are put into this position. So I trust that, and I know, because it's government, you can never, ever, ever know exactly how it's going to turn out. You just hope that it turns out and you put all the safeguards in place for that. But John is my attorney, so I've kind of given him the things that he can so eloquently put in the terminology of the legal matters. So I pray that it all works out.
He's a pro bono lawyer for you.
Yeah, I'm pro bono. I'm sure I owe him some way. But those are just my comments.
I want to say that I don't want to be cast in the role of the board's lawyer, because we have really an excellent one. I would be very happy to work for Nadine when I retire from private practice, because she's really good. I just I just want to say that she's really good, and so I'm not worried about this. I wanted to get a few things in because we're at an inflection point, and you either get these things out on the table or you don't. But I have complete confidence that we're going to be okay with this. And I will also say this. I've seen many flavors of indemnification and all that, as has Al. And I want the flavor that has the all of the traps covered, because there are traps in this and we've seen them. One of the the hardships of being in the legal practice is everything that goes wrong winds up on your desk. When things are going right, you never hear anything. Everything that goes wrong winds up on your desk. So after 37 years, it colors me a little bit, but it also gives me an idea of where the traps are. And
you and I have been running our mouths way too much.
All right, I'm shutting up. I'm putting it on mute.
I just want to make one point.
Or not.
The board members will be provided with a copy of the partnership agreement, which has to be approved by the board. So we will
Yes,
be
of course.
we will be conducting presentations to the board with respect to the terms of that agreement, so that you're comfortable when we are moving forward with seeking the approval to enter into the agreement with the fund. So
Did Beryl have a comment? I thought she did at some point.
No, I did not have a comment. I'm listening like everyone else is. What I'm trying to understand is that we are right now just creating the subsidiary, and we will have further opportunity to examine more of the details of it on a going forward basis, so
Yes.
that this particular approval is just step one. And right now, there's really nothing else but the creation of the subsidiary to approve. Is that right?
correct. This is
That's,
just
that's correct, Beryl. And I think that what this conversation does is to continue to inform us on the documents, agreements, and other legal matters related to the subsidiary, to make sure that any concerns you have continue to be expressed. However, when you think about the entering into liability around this functionality, it really comes in the form of the limited partnership agreement and its associated agreements. It won't be just one agreement, of course. And that review and that discussion and that decision to enter into it, approve that agreement, will be the one where we have locked in our protections the best we can, and you all have the chance to weigh in on the actual wording around those agreements and the indemnifications and the other concerns it may have. So this conversation informs how we put those together, so that when we finalize those agreements based on negotiations with the fund manager, based on relationships with OCM, based on the information from division of budget, we put all those things together. We all have to approve these agreements. That's where the rubber meets the road, in the sense of, once that agreement is signed, we have now signed up for that component. So this this decision today is to allow us to form a subsidiary, so we can negotiate on behalf of those agreements and think about how the subsidiaries form to get all that in place. But the actual liability that we are protecting ourselves from will be engaged around limited partnership agreement. So we certainly are hearing all that you said. Obviously, Nadine and Paul's talked to Ann Dodson, our insurance folks. We've already started thinking about making sure we have the proper liabilities and indemnifications and insurance in place to protect board members, to protect the subsidiary, and of course, protect DASNY, because obviously, all of us have that fiduciary responsibility as well.
And,
Okay.
and Ruben, if we have any thoughts about what the indemnity agreement should say, we can sort of advance with them with Nadine, sort of offline, just to see if we're all comfortable, and maybe forming, an indemnity agreement that we're all comfortable with, sort of ahead of time.
That's right. Yes.
All right.
And for the purposes of today, we are seeking authorization to file the certificate with the Department of State. So it's an administrative act. It doesn't have the language that you referenced, John. It's just asking, identifying the name of the entity and identifying that it's a public benefit or corporation, and the address. And that's the full scope of the information that's filed with the Department of State.
And if we want to
Nadine,
amend it,
John, let me please, Nadine Atal. Here's my view, and I talked to you about the 6-inch stack of documents that I would have wanted to see before we did this. I wanted to look at the contracts. I wanted to have a sense of where we were headed. You form a subsidiary. Okay, so you've got it. Now you're thinking about the next steps. Why couldn't we have done all of this at once, or at least most of it at once? And I haven't said this to you, Nadine, and I haven't said it to Ruben either, but I'm going to vote for this. I'm going to vote this up. I want to do this, but I'm not fully in favor of the concept of the one step at a time into hell opportunity. I just don't know where this is headed. And we don't have the documents to make that clear. So we do what we do now, and we're going to get it right. We're going to get it right. And I want to do it. I want to do it. But I want on the record the fact that it's my view, at least, that we did not have to rush to judgment here to put together a corporation. I know there was a 60-day issue. I got it. I'm fine with it. Maybe we should have asked for an extension. Maybe the documents could have begun, the document production could have begun. It is what it is. I want for you all to hear and to be able to look at a record that says we're doing it, we're doing what we need to do. And I think we'll get it done. But I guess there is some discomfort that it's not, in my life, decisions like this don't get made without the 6-inch stack of paper. They just don't get made without that 6-inch stack. And I'm looking to see, well, okay, now we're at step C and there's some more paper and maybe the board members are paying, absolute attention. There is a discomfort. That said, I want to congratulate you all on getting to this point. And if there are no other board members, Jerry, thank you for your comments. John, thank you for your comments. Janice, thank you for stepping up. Beryl, thank you for stepping up. There are others on the call. Happy to hear from you now. But we need to begin to close the conversation and get to a decision.
Yeah, I just want, I have a hard stop very soon. So I will have to get off sooner than later. So I just want to point that out. I am certain others share my schedule. So yeah, that I think one step at a time is the best way we can approach this. I hope that's the way we proceed.
Yeah, this is Wellington. I'm listening intently and thank you all for a very, very thoughtful and intelligent discussion. And in the interest of time, I have no problem with moving it forward at this moment.
I think the chair is frozen.
That's what I thought.
Great time to freeze. Huh?
Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear us?
He's coming back.
Yep.
He's coming back.
Amanda, are you watching for Al?
Yes, she is. She's just offline for a sec. I'm looking for him too. He's joining.
Hello.
Mr. Chairman.
You're back.
I'm sorry, my iPad overheated in the sun and I am unable now to use it, but I thought I would try to join again. So I'm on my iPhone with some luck. I'd like to see us get to a vote. Ms. Deborah, how are you?
Do you want me to make the motion now?
Say again?
Do you want a motion?
Let me get back on the screen. Yes. What I want to do is to ask for a motion to approve the resolution. And I want to ask Nadine to do a roll call vote.
Well, I'll make the motion. You need a motion?
I do need a motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I don't know who is the second, but happy to have it. Thank you.
I'll give it to you, John.
You lucky duck, lucky duck. Let's Then if Nadine, if you will call the roll and ask for approval, disapproval, or abstention.
Certainly. Starting with Ms. Snyder, approval, disapproval, or abstention?
I approve the formation of the subsidiary.
Mr. Gardner,
Approve.
Mr. Romsky,
I'll approve it and I look forward to the further documentation. Thank you.
Ms. Sullivan,
I approve it.
Ms. McKinney,
I approve.
Mr. Chen,
Same here. I approve.
Mr. Swazerski,
Approve.
Mr. Evans,
Approve.
Ms. Morris,
Approve.
and I believe our newest board member had to leave the meeting. So that concludes the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I approved. I hope I did.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to start with you.
It's fine.
Chair.
I
And-
apologize for losing the call.
Yeah, and also Nadine, for the record, Lisa Gomez, even though she has to jump off, she left a note saying that she's comfortable with the approval to create the subsidiary, for the record.
Outstanding. Thank you. Wellington, thank you. Mr. President, I think the board has approved the resolution unanimously, that is of the members present. And I congratulate you on having pulled together with your senior staff a terrific discussion. You all will have to decide how much of this discussion gets onto the record, but act judiciously. I'll ask you to do that.
We absolutely will, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate everyone's participation. Obviously, over the next 60 days, we'll have a lot of information coming toward you. We will continue to provide access to me, Paul, Nadine, and others to provide clarification. And we also will take all comments here into record and consideration as we move forward. It is our goal to make sure that all board members are protected, the DASNY is protected, but I think most importantly that we as DASNY do something that is truly meaningful for the state of New York and for the agency and authority that we work for, as we always do, whether it's OMH or OASIS or OPWDD. This will be another feather in our cap. I do think that the social equity component of this will also be something we'll all be proud of going forward. Just a quick note, we will be making a decision on fund manager sometime later today. They're doing oral interviews now. We will let you know that, and we would expect a public announcement sometime early next week. So we will give you the information prior to that public announcement.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you for a terrific meeting, Ruben. If Amanda is still on the phone, have you all discontinued sending paper copies of the board book? Do I have to go now to some electronic version of it in order to read it?
I believe actually Amanda sent a copy to you overnight. You should receive it today.
Outstanding. Nadine, yeah. You're a prince or a princess, I guess. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
You all
And if
take
there-
care.
And if there are any other
Mr. Chairman,
questions, would like the paper
just
copies.
adjourn, please. Just adjourn us, please, Mr. Chairman.
Say again, Ruben.
Just adjourn us on the record, please.
Thank you, Nadine.
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
We have to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn?
There you go, Al. You got it.
All right. Did you make the motion, Jerry?
Yes, I did.
All right. Janice, will you make the second?
Second.
All right.
Was muted.
All in favor, please indicate with aye.
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 Vera, I'm not sure.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.